They are everywhere in the conversation, in films, in music, in the way people explain events they cannot otherwise account for, and nowhere in the curriculum. Secret societies. The phrase alone triggers two reactions in almost every person who hears it: fascination or dismissal, rarely anything in between. Most people choose dismissal. It feels safer, more rational, more aligned with the version of the world they have been taught to expect. But dismissal is a choice, and like all choices, it has a cost. Because some of what has been labeled conspiracy, dismissed as paranoia, mocked as the territory of unstable minds, is simply history that was never taught. Not hidden in vaults, not guarded by shadows. Sitting in public archives, in published memoirs, in congressional testimony, in the footnotes of academic papers that almost nobody reads past the abstract, waiting for someone to look past the first page of search results. This is not a video about theories. This is a video about documented organizations with verified membership lists, verified events with confirmed dates and confirmed attendees, and the gap between what happened and what was reported to the public. 3 societies, 3 moments that shaped the modern world. None of them are secret anymore. The information is available. It has been for decades in some cases. That is almost the most unsettling part. 1877. Oxford University, England. A 23-year-old student named Cecil Rhodes wrote a document he called his Confession of Faith. It was not a religious text. It was a strategic plan. In it, he described his life's purpose with the certainty of someone who had already decided the outcome and was merely documenting the steps that would lead there. He wrote that the English-speaking race was, in his assessment, the finest the world had produced, and that this superiority conferred an obligation, and that it was therefore the duty of those who possessed it to extend its dominion across the earth. He was 23 years old when he wrote this. He had not yet made his fortune. He had not yet governed a country. He was a student with a plan and the absolute conviction to execute it. He would. By 1890, less than 15 years after writing that document at Oxford, Cecil Rhodes controlled approximately 90% of the world's diamond supply. He governed a territory in southern Africa twice the size of Texas. That territory was named after him, Rhodesia. It is now Zimbabwe. He used that accumulated wealth and political influence to build something he had been designing, in broad strokes, since his years at Oxford. He called it the Society of the Elect, a secret inner circle operating within a larger, semi-public organization known as the Round Table Groups. Its purpose was not profit, not territorial conquest in the traditional military sense. Something longer lasting, something that would survive his death. Its purpose was to identify, cultivate, and place its members, quietly, in positions of lasting influence, in every government, institution, and media organization that mattered. When Rhodes died in 1902 at the age of 48, he left the majority of his personal estate to fund a scholarship program at Oxford University. The Rhodes Scholarship, still active today, one of the most prestigious awards in the world. Its selection criteria have always been unusual for an academic scholarship. Academic excellence is a prerequisite, but it has never been sufficient on its own. Candidates are explicitly evaluated on leadership potential, on what the original selection criteria described as the energy to use their talent to the full and the will to fight for what they believe in. Over 21,000 scholars have been selected since 1902. Among them, former United States President Bill Clinton, former Australian Prime Minister Bob Hawke, the founders of several of the world's largest financial institutions. Rhodes wrote in 1877 that he wanted to recover the United States for the British Empire. He did not live to see it, but the network he funded is still placing people. Before we continue, leave a trace. Subscribe. November 1910. Jekyll Island, Georgia, United States. A private hunting club owned by J.P. Morgan and a consortium of New York financiers. Accessible only by boat. No press had been informed. No public record was created of who had arrived or when. 7 men disembarked over the course of 2 days. Each had traveled from New York separately. Each had registered at their respective hotels under a false name. The precaution was not paranoia. It was a calculated and entirely rational necessity given who they were and what they were about to do. If any financial journalist had identified even 2 of them in the same location, the implications would have been immediate. Because between those 7 men, their combined assets, their institutional affiliations, and their political connections represented approximately 1/4 of the entire accumulated wealth of the world. Senator Nelson Aldrich, head of the National Monetary Commission, father-in-law of John D. Rockefeller Jr. Frank Vanderlip, president of National City Bank, the largest bank in the United States. Paul Warburg, partner at Kuhn Loeb and Company, representative of the Rothschild banking dynasty in Europe, and 3 representatives of J.P. Morgan's financial empire. They met for 9 days. Their stated task, the reason Senator Aldrich had organized the gathering, was to design a central banking system for the United States that would modernize American finance and prevent future panics. A system that would, in theory, stabilize the American economy and prevent the financial panics that had devastated the country in 1873, 1893, and 1907. The problem was not the goal. The problem was who was designing it. The men who had been privately tasked with designing a system to regulate banking in America were themselves the largest bankers in America. The regulators and the regulated were the same people. When the draft was complete, Senator Aldrich brought it to Washington. The proposal was rejected. The optics were too obvious. So the draft was taken away, rewritten, restructured cosmetically, and reintroduced under a different name with different nominal authors listed on the cover. The substance was largely unchanged. In December of 1913, it passed. The Federal Reserve Act. The Central Bank of the United States. Privately owned by its member banks. Subject to minimal independent audit. Answering to no elected body in the way that most governmental institutions are required to. Congressman Charles Lindbergh Sr. said on the floor of the House that day, "This act establishes the most gigantic trust on earth." The statement was entered into the congressional record. It was not reported widely. It is still there. Page 466, December 22nd, 1913. The third organization is the most recent and the most visible, which makes its continued operation all the more remarkable. May 1954. The Bilderberg Hotel, Oosterbeek, Netherlands. 130 delegates from 11 Western nations gathered for a private conference. The organizer was Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, a former officer of the SS who had reinvented himself as a statesman after the war. The stated purpose was to strengthen cooperation between Europe and North America during the Cold War. The actual agenda was never published. The conference became annual. The name Bilderberg was retained as a reference to the original hotel. The attendance list evolved significantly over the following decades. Finance ministers, central bank governors, chief executives of the largest corporations in the world, media owners, intelligence directors. The format of the conference has never changed. All discussions are conducted under what is known as Chatham House Rule, a protocol developed by a British Foreign Policy Institute in 1927. Attendees may use the information they receive, but they may not reveal who said it or that anyone said it. In practice, it means that the most powerful people in Western finance, politics, and media can spend 3 days in the same room, reaching shared conclusions without any verifiable record of the alignment ever being created. The guest list is published. It has been since the 1990s. In 2008, the attendee list included the chief executives of Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, the Secretary General of NATO, the heads of state of 4 European nations, the editor of The Economist, all in the same room, for 3 days, under a rule that says nothing they discussed can be attributed to them. That same year, the global financial crisis began. Correlation is not causation. That is true. But the absence of a record, is not the same as the absence of a conversation. The story is not over. Stay close. Subscribe. 3 organizations, 3 different eras, 3 different methods, but one shared characteristic. They operated at the intersection of money, governance, and information. And they did so, deliberately, outside of public accountability. The Society of the Elect placed its people inside governments. The Jekyll Island group wrote the financial rules that still govern the global economy. The Bilderberg group aligns the people who implement those rules, without leaving a transcript. None of what has been described in this video requires a master conspiracy in the dramatic sense. No single villain operating from a secret headquarters. No unified plan passed down through centuries in sealed envelopes. It requires something far more ordinary than that, and therefore far more durable, far harder to dismantle. People with shared economic interests and shared assumptions about how the world should be organized, finding each other through institutional proximity and quietly arranging the structures of governance to reflect those interests. That is not a theory. That is organizational behavior. The difference between these organizations and a corporation or a political party is that most organizations are required to operate with some degree of transparency. These were not. And in at least 2 of the 3 cases, they actively chose not to. And visibility, accountability to an informed public, is the only structural mechanism that separates legitimate governance from something that operates as control. The documents referenced in this video exist in public archives. The names are part of the historical record. The dates are verified by multiple independent sources. What remains after all of it is not a further revelation. It is a simpler, more uncomfortable question. The question of what you do with this information. Dismissal is one option. It is the most comfortable. But comfort, as a guide to what is true, has never performed particularly well. It tends to select for convenience rather than accuracy. These organizations existed. Some still do. The question is not whether to believe it. Belief is the wrong frame entirely. The sources are cited. The records are real. The question is why it took this long for someone to tell you in plain language, and what that delay itself tells you about how information moves. Subscribe. There is more buried.